How Dogs Think a Nonverbal Link to Canine Communication. Copyright 1995 by William E. Campbell. Have you ever seen a device or a program designed to correct a dog behavior problem that explained how smart dogs are and how they think? Most plans or gadgets enable owners, literally, to declare war on their hapless pets. Little or no concern is afforded to what the dogs happen to think about them. In fact, the implication is that dogs don't think at all, either they just react to external stimuli like robots, or respond according to genetically controlled drives. Dogs are rarely credited with the ability to solve a problem mentally, to analyze a situation, imagine ways to manipulate or control it, then take a pre-planned course of action toward a goal that was preconceived in the dog's mind. In short, the dog is considered a real dummy, then treated like a dummy. But this concept is not correct. Dogs are smart. They can, and usually do, think rings around their owners. And they can do it because most owners have never learned how to think like a dog. Understanding nonverbal thinking, we all wonder now and then what our dog is thinking. If we wonder aloud, perhaps when mealtime is approaching and the dog is looking expectantly at us, we might say something like, "I'll bet Tippy's thinking, when is my dinner going to be ready?" In all likelihood, Tippy isn't originating any thoughts about when dinner will be ready. It is more likely Tippy is imagining or imaging in his mind the words and movements you usually say and perform before getting his dinner, something like, "You want dinner, Tippy?" All that tail wagging and those pleading eyes are aimed at stimulating you to say it. But an inability to originate thoughts in a spoken language does not make dogs unintelligent. Even people don't actively think in a spoken language unless they actively speak it. For instance, during a short vacation to Japan, if you don't already speak the language, you'll probably pick up the meaning of a few words. After a few natives look at you in the morning and say, "Ohio," you may eventually learn that they're not curious about where you're from, but are wishing you a good morning. Still, you won't think in Japanese unless you live there a few months and actively speak it. Even a pet Akita will never learn to speak or think in the native lingo because their voice boxes, tongues and lips cannot formulate the sounds of Japanese, or English, or French, etc., etc. The limit of our dog's language learning is the meaning of the sounds of certain words. Luckily, dogs are quick to learn the sounds that are important to them. With this in mind, when Tippy is prodding us about serving dinner, we'd be wise to discard ideas about complete sentences being originated and thought about, and replace them with the non-language concept of mental images. To illustrate this further, when most Tippies are asking for dinner, they actually look from their owners toward the place where it is served, generally the kitchen. Evidence of imagery. Some very convincing research suggests that dogs think in sensory impressions, visual, sound and odor images, etc. This is not to say that they sit around on quiet days experiencing videos inside their brains. However, they likely share our ability to form and experience in their minds certain images, odors and sounds. The scientific basis for this idea came from Russia and was published in the US in 1973. A scientist named Versus Ruzinov was studying the electrophysiology of the brain and had several dogs wired with brainwave equipment and radio transmitters. When the dogs were brought into the lab from the kennels for experimental conditioning tests, the electroencephalograph machine was turned on to record their brainwave patterns. This was done at the same time each day, 5 days a week. One weekend, purely by accident, Ruzinov brought a group of visitors into the lab and turned on the EEG machine. Lo, the dog that was normally scheduled for tests during the week at that time was sending waveforms nearly identical to his regular working patterns. When the testing time passed, the dog's brain waves soon returned to their normal at-rest forms. I never found any mention by Ruzinov as to whether the dogs out in the kennel were actually performing their conditioned laboratory behaviorisms. Chances are they were not, but one thing is almost sure, compared to human experience in similar types of studies, the dogs were apparently experiencing them mentally. 2,3. The late Polish scientist, Jerzy Konarski, 3 taught dogs to salivate and expect food in their trays when a light flickered. This was done regularly every few minutes. However, after a few trials, the dogs started salivating and looking at the trays as if the food were actually there, even though the light had not flickered. Konarski ventured that the dogs were hallucinating about both the stimulus, the light, and the reward for salivating the food. One thing is sure, something was going on in the dogs' minds that made them behave as if they were happening. Some human examples before going on with dogs. Let us consider some facets of our own mind's eye, as suggested by Konarski. Imagine we have a date to meet a loved one at a busy restaurant. We get there on time and sit at a table near the door. 15 minutes go by, but no friend arrives. We begin to wonder if they are coming at all. We start watching people approach the door. Pretty soon, people with similar features almost cause us to call out to them. The more concerned and anxious we become, the more apt we are to mistake strangers for our friend. When he or she finally arrives, the pleasure and relief we feel is often mixed with mild displeasure. We are ambivalent, we have mixed emotions about meeting them in the future. Almost everyone has mental imagery. Often, just the thought of a loved one conjures up their image. This can apply to sounds, as well. Think about your favorite musical piece and you can often hear it in your mind's ear. These are positive images. They are emotionally pleasant. At the other end of the scale, recalling a terrifying experience can not only create its images, but sometimes even make us shudder. This is an example of negative, emotionally unpleasant images. Back to dogs. So it is with our dogs. When we are late getting home, or if they overmiss us because we spoil them with attention and petting every time they demand it, they very likely worry in images, too. They may well recall images of us and our activities, such as fluffing the pillows on the sofa, putting away record albums, handling magazines and books, putting on shoes just before leaving, sitting in a favorite armchair, etc. As a result of this, they often engage in activities which involve them with these images. Pillows wind up on the floor, albums or magazines are moved or chewed, a chair seat gets dug up, shoes are brought out of the closet. If they can't have us there, they try to interact with things that symbolize us. If dogs really do store up and recall images of us and life's other objects and experiences, it follows that we might use this to our mutual benefit. But since most owners do not understand how dogs think, this imagery is where the seeds of most behavior problems are sown. Dogs receive and recall conflicting images of owners and many important experiences.